All right, today we're diving into a legal mystery that's got everything. A huge bank fraud, a pile of gold bars, and a Supreme Court decision that hinges on one critical question. What happens when the most important piece of evidence, well, just doesn't connect? Let's get into it. So to really get a sense of the scale here, let's just look at the numbers. 6 crores and 70 lakh rupees. Yeah, that is the staggering amount that was cleverly siphoned out of Vijaya Bank. And that single act set off a legal drama that would last for years and go all the way to the highest court in India.
So here's our game plan for today. We'll start with the fraud itself. Then we'll meet the jeweler who's at the heart of this whole thing. We'll look at the prosecution's case, see exactly how the Supreme Court picked it apart, and then of course we'll cover the final verdict and what it all means for the law.
Okay, so first things first. Every legal case has to start with the facts, right? In the legal world, they call this the factual matrix. You can think of it as the solid ground, the undisputed story that everything else is built on top of. And this was no simple smash and grab. No, this was a really sophisticated, white-collar heist. The people behind it literally invented a company out of thin air, MS Globe International, used forged documents to open a bank account, and then started funneling in millions using fake telegraphic transfers, or TTs. Now you really got to pay attention to this timeline, because this is where the story gets interesting. The fraud itself happened super fast, all back in 1997. Money comes in, money goes out. The bank figures it out by August. But then, look at that last date. The key piece of evidence, the gold, isn't found until June 2001. That's a 4-year gap. And trust me, that delay is way more than just a little hiccup. It's going to become the Achilles heel of the prosecution's entire case.
And that massive 4-year gap, it leads us straight to the main character in our story, a jeweler by the name of Nanda Kumar Babulal Soni. In the court documents, he's just accused number 3.
And this is what it all comes down to. The physical evidence that becomes the absolute center of this entire legal universe. 4 years after the fraud, the CBI, India's top investigation agency, raids the jeweler's shop. And they find 205 gold bars. Literally everything from this point on is going to revolve around these bars.
So the CBI's theory seemed pretty simple on the surface, right? The money was stolen from the bank, it was used to buy gold. Hey, look, we found the gold. These 205 bars are it. Case closed. But, well, as the defense was about to argue, it wasn't nearly that simple. Okay, so the stage is set. Let's really get into the nitty-gritty of the legal arguments, what lawyers call the contentions, that were battled out all the way up to the Supreme Court.
And this slide really cuts to the chase. On one side, you have the prosecution saying, look, we found the stolen property. Simple. But on the other side, the jeweler's defense team, the appellant, asks a devastatingly simple question. Oh, really? Prove it. How can you possibly prove that these specific gold bars found 4 years later are the exact ones bought with that stolen money? They argued that the link, that crucial connection, was completely missing.
And the defense? Well, they had some really solid points. The prosecution's case was full of holes. First, there's that 4-year delay we keep talking about. I mean, gold bars are fungible. One 10-tola bar looks pretty much like any other. How could you possibly identify them after all that time? And to make things even worse for the prosecution, some of their most important witnesses basically flipped. They turned hostile in court, meaning they refused to back up the story they were supposed to tell. All right, now we're getting to the main event, the Supreme Court's analysis. This is where the justices take out their legal scalpels and meticulously dissect every single piece of evidence and every law that applies.
So the specific charge against the jeweler was under Section 411 of the Indian Penal Code. Now this law is really specific. It's not just about having stolen stuff. To get a conviction, the prosecution has to prove that you dishonestly received it, and, this is the key part, that you knew or had a really good reason to believe it was stolen. That guilty mind element, that's everything.
So that brings us to the core legal question that the Supreme Court had to answer. If you want to convict someone under Section 411, what exactly do you, the prosecution, have to prove beyond any reasonable doubt?
Now, the court wasn't just making this up as they went along. They were applying legal tests that had been around for a long time, looking back at precedent cases like Shiv Kumar versus State of MP and Trimbak versus State of MP. And those cases basically give us a checklist. You have to prove the property was stolen. Check. You have to prove the accused got it dishonestly. Check. You have to prove they knew it was stolen. Check. And then, the final killer requirement in this case, you have to prove there is an absolutely unbroken chain connecting the original theft to the property you recovered.
And after looking at all the evidence, the Supreme Court's observation was crystal clear. That vital link in the chain, it wasn't just weak,
It was shattered. The prosecution just could not definitively prove that the gold bars they seized in 2001 were the very same ones bought with the bank's money back in 1997. The chain of evidence was broken.
And so, with that central piece of their case completely demolished, the prosecution's entire argument against the jeweler just crumbled.
The verdict was clean and absolute. Acquitted. The Supreme Court overturned the conviction from the lower courts. Nandakumar Babalal Soni walked free.
And this quote from a legal analysis of the case just nails the whole point. In criminal law, having a really strong suspicion, even if it seems totally obvious, is not enough. You have to bring conclusive, hard evidence. That's the bar the prosecution has to meet, and in this case, they just couldn't get there.
So you might be wondering, what happened to those 205 gold bars? Well, since the prosecution couldn't prove they were stolen property, the law is very straightforward. They have to go back to the person they were taken from. So the gold was returned to the jeweler.
So, okay, it's a fascinating story about fraud and gold. But what's the bigger picture here? What are the key legal lessons we can all learn from this? Why does this case still matter?
This verdict really hammers home 4 fundamental principles of our justice system. 1, the burden of proof is always on the prosecution. The person accused doesn't have to prove they're innocent. 2, if your case is built on circumstantial evidence, that chain of circumstances has to be rock solid with 0 gaps. It has to point to one conclusion and one conclusion only: guilt. 3, you can't convict someone for having stolen goods just on a hunch. You need concrete proof that they knew what they were doing. And finally, time matters. That 4-year delay wasn't just a minor detail, it was a fatal blow to the entire case. And it all leaves us with this huge, fundamental question that sits at the very heart of justice itself. Where exactly is the line between a very strong suspicion and actual legal proof? This case gives us a powerful answer. That line is bright, it is clear, and for the prosecution to cross it, they must present a chain of evidence that is complete, conclusive, and totally, utterly unbroken.